Good afternoon, members of the public, members of the press, and welcome to another weekly press conference hosted at the Office of the Opposition in Trinidad and Tobago. This week we will again continue to speak on some of the critical issues facing Trinidad and Tobago, facing our country, economic, political issues, as well as matters of national security and current affairs. It is, of course, the role and responsibility of the opposition to hold the government to account, to question the government and demand responsibility and proper governance on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Today, I'm joined by former Senator Sean Sobers, a leading attorney at law, who will speak on some issues of national security, the crime situation which has taken grip of this country, and advance some of our critical observations and, of course, some of our policy recommendations. Mr. Sobers.
Thank you, Dr. Moonilal. A special good evening to all persons who are watching and listening to us at our press conference this evening. Thank you for joining us here today. Now, today, as Dr. Moonilal would have indicated, I'm here to speak on some of the issues related to national security and crime and criminality within our country. It is no secret that we are currently wrestling with a spiraling crime situation within Trinidad and Tobago that clearly the government of this country has no clue with respect to solving or to bringing it under control. As we sit here this afternoon, we are approximately 170 murders accounted for this year. That generally equates to about 42 murders for the day. I want persons to understand and bring that squarely into their perspective, into their conscious minds, as to the reality of the crime situation that we are actually dealing with, that is currently plaguing Trinidad and Tobago. And this comes after a period of time within this country. We, as a country, are blessed to be to have within Trinidad and Tobago a multitude of different denominational and religious bodies and sects. And this would have been playing out during a time where both Christians would have been celebrating Lent, reflecting upon the death and the rising of Christ, and where our Muslim brothers and sisters are still observing the holy month of Ramadan, the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And during such a period where persons are fasting and paying religious homage, you would expect some degree of reverence to take hold within Trinidad and Tobago, and unfortunately that was the complete opposite. We would have seen over the last Easter weekend, especially over a 4-day period, there were in excess of 20 murders taking place within Trinidad and Tobago, something that has never happened before, unprecedented within our history. That during that period of time you would have had significant editorials in the daily newspapers indicating categorically that Trinidad and Tobago was drenched in a sea of blood. Trinidad and Tobago was drowning in crime and criminality, and that the blood of our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, sons and daughters continued to flow within this country without a palatable response or solution being proffered to the citizens of the country. Now, we as a responsible opposition, time and time again, through different outreach and media broadcasts, would have been coming to the public, letting them know that we are dealing with a crime situation within this country that didn't just start yesterday. It didn't just start over the Easter weekend. We've been dealing with this for the last 7 years. We've been indicating through different broadcasts and media outreach that Trinidad and Tobago continues to burn while Rowley and his band of misfits continue to fiddle and have a grand old time. And all of this in amalgamation is happening under the clueless and callous gaze of both Keith Christopher Rowley being the Prime Minister of this country and the Chair of the National Security Council, and also Minister Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hines, the Minister of National Security. And one had to wonder, where is the response? Where is the tangible solution to this very real problem that all citizens across the landscape of this country was facing? Because crime does not identify with red and yellow. It don't have any red and yellow crime in this country. It have crime. And so we were looking to the government for a solution. And when you hear what they have to tell you, you understand why we are placed in this position. When you hear the Minister of National Security telling the public at a press conference, at a press briefing, that he is not responsible for the safety of citizens within this country, you understand why we have what I like to call an evolution of crime and criminals within our country. You understand why we have an evolution of an emboldened criminal element that is striking at any point in time during the day, whether it be day or night. That you have an unfortunate evolution of petty theft and larceny that turns into robbery and home invasions, that turn into rape and murder. And no palatable solutions. When we say these things, we know why we're saying them. Because you are getting some tidbits of advice from the government, but not really any true solutions to fix the problem. As it pertains to robbery, the advice that they would want to tell you is, listen, don't conduct your business in the day, in the night. Try and conduct your business in the day, and when you wrap up your business during the day, hurry to your vehicle and get back home. And we know that these bits of advice hold no water, because we're dealing with a criminal element that is striking no longer only under the cover of darkness. They are doing so in the day. Our citizens are no longer safe to conduct those business activities during the course of the day. They are being robbed and assaulted during the day. Robbery and assaults are happening on the high streets within this country, unparalleled, unprecedented, never seen before. Persons are being gunned down in broad daylight in the full glare of the public. And their advice, as opposed to solutions, doesn't stop there. Their bad advice continues as it pertains to domestic violence as well. We would have seen within the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, a number of murder-suicides. And I know how difficult it is to deal with suicides. I am part of a family that had to wrestle with that a few years ago. These are serious problems. And the things that are being said by the administration can only infuriate persons who've gone through situations like that. That when you look a bit more closely to some of these situations and these domestic violence, these murder-suicides that are occurring takes place, you recognize that some of these persons could have been locked into the DV system that we have in this country. We would have been part of a team led by the opposition leader, who would have been part of an amendment to a bill in the parliament a couple of years ago that dealt with domestic violence. And on the Hansard, on the record, we are there saying, Dr. Moonilal and other persons would have been there saying that there needed to be more strengthening of the institutions related to DV, because you have scores of victims lining up, petitioning the courts. During this pandemic period, the courts made significant changes, allowing for persons to have their matters dealt with virtually, have their matters timetabled through telephone calls or even emails, right? And then when the matter is to be called and to be heard, you have the magistrate and the court staff showing up, the victim is showing up, but you don't have the potential defendant or respondent there because he wasn't served with the summons to come to court. And that squarely lies at the feet of a small arm of the TTPS that is responsible for that. But they themselves have been crying out for assistance to be better resourced from this government to do their jobs better. But that has not been heard. Their cries have not been heard. And these are the responses from persons that we've grown to get accustomed to, who constantly tell us they are not responsible for your safety. And while all of this is transpiring within Trinidad and Tobago within the last week and a half, you had the persons with the direct responsibility for crime and criminality within this country, the Minister of National Security and the Prime Minister, both of them were absent from Trinidad and Tobago. When questions were raised in the parliament as to where the Minister of National Security was, what is the plan, where did he go, is it to fight crime, what was the budget, who did he carry, did he went to Fetline Party or otherwise, no response, no accountability, no transparency with what they are doing during this particular period. And even when the Prime Minister returned and he was asked at a press briefing at the airport, what is the position with respect to crime in this country? Where is the plan? What is the solution? He had the temerity to tell the country, well, you didn't know that Trinidad and Tobago is a violent society? What rock were you living under? That is the solution. That is the response. We are a violent society. What are our international partners to take from a response like that from the Prime Minister, no less, of Trinidad and Tobago, communicating that? What are visitors coming here to think, to come to spend $1, if the Prime Minister is indicating that Trinidad and Tobago is a violent society? What are our international investors, persons who want to come and invest into Trinidad and Tobago, think when they do their feasibility studies that the Prime Minister, the head of the government, is saying to you, to them, that Trinidad and Tobago is a violent society? Those statements demonstrate to us as a nation that they've thrown in the towel, that they've given up, that they are a government that is all about having power with no responsibility. That Trinidad and Tobago, when the Prime Minister, then opposition leader Keith Rowley, between 2010 and 2015, running all over Trinidad and Tobago, spewing vitriol, he never said, not once, that Trinidad and Tobago was a violent society between 10 and 15. But from 15 to 22, under his stewardship, Trinidad and Tobago became a violent society. And built in and fixed into that press conference, he spoke about CCTV cameras because he knew that members of the media was going to ask him about CCTV cameras. And he went on with a song and dance about procurement of CCTV and contract for CCTV and fixing. Again, as a responsible opposition, from the parliament to the pavement and back again, we've been speaking about the usage of CCTV cameras at their lowest being a deterrent for crime and criminality, and at their highest being utilized for evidence in criminal matters. We've been saying that if you go into any police station, you'll recognize in the charge room that is the TV screen in the charge room is blank. There is where you're supposed to see the CCTV cameras in the region. We've been saying that for a number of years, but he's only found his voice to speak on that issue because another body was dumped at the heights of Aripo. The same heights of Aripo that the opposition responsibly would have been petitioning and calling upon the government through candlelight vigils within the parliament to the pavement and back again, that we need CCTV cameras there, we need increased patrols, we need lighting there, and another body is dumped. This is the position of this administration, that the Prime Minister could find CCTV cameras, and cameras rather, to give to the police for them to mako persons engage in peaceful protests with respect to fuel hike, but you have no cameras to give them to deal with crime in this country. That is what we are dealing with, the level of incompetence within Trinidad and Tobago. And when Hines finally found his way back to Trinidad and Tobago, from wherever he went, he had a press conference on Sunday, where he went into, as they say, chapter and verse on this issue with respect to spyware and whatnot. And he held so many different caps within his tenure as the Minister of National Security, member of the Joint Select Committee with respect to national security, and a member of the National Security Council, and he knew so much about spyware. And spyware is existing in all mature jurisdictions within the world, and nowhere else in the world has anyone ever spoken out against spyware. And I would have said it before, and our political leader would have said it as well. A cursory glance on the internet with respect to spyware and the illegal usage of spyware by governments, for which it was never intended to be purchased for. You would see several countries where persons would have spoken out. And I quoted some of them. You have countries like Armenia, Estonia, Germany, Hungary, Jordan, Israel, India, Panama, Palestine, the United Arab Emirates, Uganda, Ukraine, United Kingdom, the United States, Yemen, Poland, Saudi Arabia, Spain, just to name a few. All of them persons would have spoken out against the mal usage of spyware against its citizenry. Hines also went on to speak about the fact that As far as he's aware, no politician was ever involved or interfered with respect to interception of communication. But yet you have the former Commissioner of Police coming out to indicate that a senior cabinet official was coercing and putting pressure on him to put a constable to run that particular department that was supposed to deal with interception of data. Who are we supposed to believe? Because this is a government full of lies and who are pressed on not accounting to the public. He went on to say in that press conference that he was reading from some type of report where he had an expert report in front of him, which went back to when Mrs. Prasad Bissessa would have released certain information back in 2009 about the Manning administration spying on citizens. And he said that the expert report indicated that there was an international loss of confidence within Trinidad and Tobago and whatnot and whatnot. And just as we do within the parliament, when we ask them, simply name the expert who compiled that report, cite the name of the document so we can have a look at it independently. They can't do that because most of the time it is them scribbling down the same report in a corner and then want to force feed you with the information. And you're talking about loss of confidence. It is your same leader, the current Prime Minister, when he was in government in 2009, who came out, and it is on the Hansard within the Parliament, to indicate categorically that Kamla Prasad Bissessa did nothing wrong by indicating that there was spying going on against the citizens by the Manning administration. Hines further went on to speak as well too about equipment being purchased by the National Security Council without National Security Council and cabinet approval, the spyware equipment. So you are now telling the country that this type of sensitive, dangerous, intrusive software has been purchased, and it has been purchased without approval from the National Security Council, without cabinet approval, and you sit there as the Minister of National Security and you do not indicate if what you are saying is true, that a police investigation has now been launched for the purchase of this spyware without proper approval. You sit there and you don't speak about that, which brings into question whether or not what you are saying, if at all it is in fact true. And this is the situation we are faced with. He went on to also indicate that the spyware is only being utilized to treat with criminals within this country. And that as well too, something is wrong. The last report that we have, our political leaders spoke about it, is in 2016, where a report was made with respect to the activities of the SSN utilization of the spy software. Over 750,000 interceptions made. How much of those interceptions eventually evolved into an arrest? If the spy software is being utilized to treat with criminal elements within this country, why is it we are not seeing it reflected within the crime rate within this country? Why aren't we seeing more arrests within this country pursuant to those interceptions? Why is the murder rate so high within this country if you're using it to intercept criminal information? It is because you are not doing that. You're intercepting everybody else's information except that which it is supposed to be intended for. And he ended that press conference by indicating categorically that Kamla Prasad Bissessa must produce evidence or she should be condemned by all. And I said, and I will continue to say, and I will say this afternoon, that Kamla Prasad Bissessa does not have to produce any evidence. You've done so by your own admissions. And for her to take bait for what? To tell you where she get the evidence from? To out the persons who whistleblown on the illegal activities taking place? She's smarter than that. And if it is anyone in this country who needs to be condemned for certain statement, it is when your leader would have gone to the parliament back in 2014 thereabouts with Emailgate, spewed a set of conspiracy propaganda about murder and whatnot, or conspiring to commit murder against journalists, right? And when investigations were conducted locally by the TTPS and abroad by Yahoo and Google and the rest of them, by the FBI and Homeland Security, that is how far this thing stretched. All of them came back years later to rubbish those claims and indicate that there was no truth whatsoever to it. So if it is anyone who should be condemned by us all as being reckless and dangerous to the well-being of Trinidad and Tobago, for those comments that were made, or for any comments that were made, it is Keith Christopher Rowley for Emailgate and not Kamla Prasad Visesa. Right? All of this is being done by this administration. All of these things that we are going through by this administration. It is time for citizens to be aware as to the period that we are living in within Trinidad and Tobago, the dangers that we face by the same administration who we've signed a social contract with to protect us, because clearly they are only protecting their own interests and not the safety and security of citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. The last time that I spoke at a press conference, I said that we are no longer asking for assistance from this government and for those in authority. We are demanding it. And weeks later, we are not in the same position. We are worse off. We continue to plead with those in authority to assist persons, to provide security and safety to the citizens of this country so that we can live our lives peacefully. As a responsible opposition, we will continue to assist where we can to provide information and tangible solutions to the problems that we are faced with, because we are mandated to do so as a responsible opposition and by our political leader. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Sean Sobers, for that very vivid account of the horrible situation that confronts the country today in terms of crime and insecurity, and the clueless and hopeless attempt by the PNM administration to confront criminals and the criminal enterprise, which is now threatening to destroy this country, and it's something that we must take seriously. And I'm sure that members of the press will have some questions for Mr. Sobers in the next few minutes. At this time, I'd like to address the press conference on a few matters, namely the recent judgment, as the national community would know. About 48 hours ago, Mr. Justice Ricky Rahim ruled on a matter that was before the courts for, I believe, about 6 years, and delivered a voluminous judgment in a matter involving Namalco Construction Services and the Estate Management and Business Development Company, and others, of course. And this is a copy of the judgment here. This is actually done on both sides, so it will be double the size I'm holding. Of course, but we like to save paper, so we photocopy it on both sides. But it's a voluminous document, comprehensive in some way, and speaks to several issues. Now, my job here today is really not to further complicate or sophisticate some of these issues, some legal issues and so on. It's not my job. I'm not interested in further deepening the complexity of what was a very long drawn out process at the court, at the civil court, but really to raise a few issues concerning this. I also have taken note that the Estate Management Business Company also issued a statement, I believe yesterday, on this matter as well, and I have a copy of that, and I will reflect on this in the next few moments. But let me begin this story by indicating that the matter of the EMBDC has been before the court and public opinion on several fronts. It is something that the Rowley administration, Mr. Rowley, Mr. Stuart Young, Mr. Faris Alwari, they are obsessed about. The purpose of the Estate Business Development Company, a company that was actually initiated by, I believe, the Patrick Manning administration several years ago, prior to 2010, is really to develop lands and the assets that were held by Caroni 1975 Limited for two purposes: one, for the Caroni workers, and secondly, for the business development of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. That is their fundamental purpose. The EMBDC has no other purpose but to develop lands and assets formerly of Caroni. You develop that for the purpose of economic development. And secondly, pursuant to court judgments and rulings and so on, the EMBDC has a responsibility for developing lands for the former Caroni workers pursuant to their own termination agreements. I just want to remind the national community that under the Kamla Prasad Bisesa People's Partnership Administration between 2010 and 2015, 8,000 former Caroni workers received land, including 5,000 2-acre plots for agriculture and 3,000 residential lots. These are Caroni workers receiving this. We developed under our administration 12,000 acres of land. 12,000 acres of land. Today, if you drive in Exchange Village in Couva, if you drive in Picton outside of San Fernando, if you go to several areas in this country, you will see Caroni workers, ex-sugar workers, have built their homes. They have now settlements, they have villages, they have in some cases towns emerging on lands that were formerly held by Caroni, developed by the People's Partnership and handed out by Kamla Prasad Bisesa. So you can see the prosperity and development, certainly in places in Couva, in Diamond Village, in Naparima and so on. Now, I raise that point to tell you the purpose of the EMBDC. The EMBDC was never developed as a litigation company to take everybody to court and spend all your time in the High Court, the Court of Appeal and the Privy Council. The matters that are subject to this business here of Namalco are several developments. They started off, understand first that it is the contractor that sued the government. The government never sued the contractor. It's the contractor that sued the government for payments. Because the government, Keith Rowley and his government, failed to meet and treat. Failed to sit down at the table and negotiate or to build some type of agreement on payment of debt. When we got into power in 2010, I remind you, I was told that we were owing $5 billion in debt to contractors. The People's Partnership. We did not close down company, and I'll come to that momentarily. We did not take everybody to court. What we did is we met and we treated with the contracting community. And we had an understanding that we cannot pay you everything we owe you, but we will pay in peace and we will negotiate. And as we go along, the national community would be amazed to know that there were contractors who accepted small payments on their debts and they actually waived interest payments. I'll come to that matter in a while. They waived interest payments so long as the government met in good faith and began to pay in small parts, because you cannot enter government and immediately pay people hundreds of millions of dollars and so on. You'll pay piece by piece. So in contention were a few developments. Could I tell you, Picton won in contention. That award was made in March 2009. 2009. The chairman of the EMBDC then was one Noel Garcia. It was under the Manning administration. 2009 May. The CEO was one Keith Gray. I'm not sure I know him. Rupchan Singh Road, which is another settlement in dispute in terms of payments and so on. That contract was handed out, awarded in April 2010. April 2010. Again, under the Manning administration, Mr. Noel Garcia, I believe, was chairman at the time. So, two of the biggest settlements here, contracts were given March 2009 and April 2010. The election, I believe, was in May 2010, if I'm not mistaken. The Pitimoon, incidentally, the Pitimoon tendering process took place in May 2010, before the general elections. When we got into office, we stopped that. We reviewed that, and a process, we undertook a process, and it was only in February 2012 a contract was awarded and so on. Cedar Hill, which is part of this as well, was tendered in February 2015, awarded in March 2015. So I make the point now that the majority of these areas in dispute and the large quantum that we are dealing with had to do with contracts entered into under the Manning administration, under a board led by Noel Garcia, and we must never forget, under an executive director, both chairman and CEO, by the name of Uttara Rao. People in the country may forget that name, but that's an important name. He was executive chairman, meaning effectively both CEO and chairman. And this business was entered into. I also make the point that the supplemental agreements that they raise in these matters supplemental agreements are quite common now under the FIDIC system of contract management. It will not surprise those in the know, but it may surprise others. The Mosquito Creek now, that has collapsed in South, the Mosquito Crack as we call it. Do you know on that highway extension there are supplementary agreements in place now? So it is not something new, it is not something unknown, it is something in the industry, given FIDIC contract management systems and so on, that the client normally will enter as a matter of course. So yesterday, or 48 hours ago, we got a ruling. And the ruling, through a court order, was essentially to pay $427 million in unpaid fees to the Labre-based Namalco company. Now, I took note that the EMBDC the next day found time to type out a page, a release, indicating that they won. Now, I want to tell the EMBDC, you should mash brakes immediately. I cannot understand how people don't know how much they have to pay, but they say we win. Now, what they have been doing in this country is lighting a $100 bill to search for 5 cents. That's what they're doing. They light a $100 bill to search for 5 cents. Because in that process, many professionals involved in these matters are linked to the PNM, are direct relatives of high PNM officials. Many professionals. And we will call their name as we go along. They are linked to these matters and obtain huge fees from ongoing matters. As my colleague Mr. Sobers told me, he said their policy is court forever. Because they do not want to pay. They believe it's better to stay in court so their friends can make money, their relatives. So the judgment spoke directly, frontally, to $427 million. The EMBDC declared, we win, because the claim, I believe, was around $1.3 billion. So when they hear 427, they win. But what they are not saying in this flimsy release, what they are not telling the country, and if you read the judgment, as 99% of the country will not. They will not read the judgment. I will tell you, in addition to this 427, they have to pay interest on the 427 and other outstanding fees, interest which may be dated back to 2013. And that interest is to be calculated in the month of May, I believe in and around the 23rd of May. They are calculating the interest. It's also a complex activity. But the interest on $427 million, plus they are not telling the country as well, and the members of the national community will be eager to know, they are not telling the country another part of the story. That the court ruled that they will have to pay interest, but also on the interim payment certificate. Now that's a big word to say you owe money. Yeah? You owe money, so we call it IPC and so on. They have to pay on the Pitimoon estate. It has to be determined, first to begin, some interim payments must be paid and assessed. It has to be assessed by the master. The court, meaning the court system, will continue an assessment on Pitimoon. And that is in addition to the 427 million. It is in addition to quantum. It is in addition to interest. It is in addition to legal fees. So EMBDC, you do not even know how much you have to pay, but you declare victory. We win. And this is really typical PNM incompetence, typical PNM arrogance, that you can declare that you win something and you don't even know how much you have to pay. You don't know how much you have to pay. You may have to sell the shirt on your back to pay that company from Labre. When you add up all of this, we believe that the government will owe and have to pay in and around $800 million. And that is excluding the legal fees that the state incur. Because the state brought down a Queen's Counsel who stayed at the Hyatt for 6 weeks. Food and drink. Bed and breakfast. Brought down other professional companies from the United Kingdom and or United States. I'm not sure about there, but I believe the United Kingdom. Professional companies came down here to testify, to do what is called sand density studies. I don't know, that's digging up the stand to see how long it there and if it could last. And they concluded that, listen, those studies can't work now, too long gone, so we can't use that as any assessment. Imagine the government used taxpayers' dollars for sand density study and then have to pay $800 million. at the end of the day. While they could have negotiated with that company, paid a little piece as you go along, paid a little piece, and get the company to write off interest, to reduce how much they're claiming. The large-scale contractors will easily reduce their amounts and so on. If you negotiate, as we did, you forget we had to negotiate all type of large-scale contracts when we came in. So, more or less, $800 million must be paid. And they will add it up. I can't do the maths now because they're determining interest, they're determining quantum, they're going to determine a major settlement. PT Moon has to be determined here. And according to the judgment, the government has to pay for that. It's just that the judgment didn't assess it yet. They're leaving it part to the court and part, I believe, out of an arbitration. Because they have, another big word here, they have accepted a result of an arbitration on PT Moon, meaning you have to pay. But it is not included in terms of a number in the judgment. So this is in addition to 427 million. So I call on the EMBDC today to please mash brakes. Don't talk about win or lose. You are celebrating prematurely. And anything premature is bad. So you are celebrating prematurely. And do not declare victory when you do not even know how much you have to pay. That is the point. The EMBDC is not a litigation company. I want to remind the national community, in and around March 2020, they lost another matter to Junior Sammy, a $121 million matter. They have so far, they were very gracious, I believe, to pay $80 million just before the last general election. I believe it was just before. They were very gracious to pay $80 million, more or less. The EMBDC, however, has appealed that to the Court of Appeal. So this company that have people on the street with placard and banner every week saying they didn't get their grandfather land. This company that should be providing the land to the Caroni workers are in the Court of Appeal against Junior Sammy. They have now, by this judgment, $700 to $800 million they have to pay. And other cases they have lost. They have lost. The EMBDC is not a litigation company. That is not a British law firm. They are not. They are a company designed to provide land and develop land and so on. And what they do is another interesting thing the PNM has been doing. Anytime they are on the back foot with these matters, do you know they blame their own employees? So in these matters, they say, no, the EMBDC is innocent, we blame the employee. We had employees who played the fool. But yet, in this matter, to my knowledge, they did not produce the employee to give a witness statement or to go to court and testify. They did not. The employee in question did not. Now, as to the reasons of that, I don't know. I cast absolutely no aspersion on the very good work of Mr. Justice Ricky Ryan. Mr. Ryan dealt with matters Mr. Justice Ryan dealt with matters before him. And as he said clearly, these are not matters of politics as far as the court is concerned. But what I'm raising here is a matter of politics. What I am raising is a matter of politics. The role of Keith Rowley and his government in undermining the business community by a pattern of behavior to litigate against every business, every contractor, court forever, so their friends and family could get money. And they punish the business community. Because I want to put it to you, Namalco went to court, spent 6 years in court. I can't believe and imagine the amount of money the company would have spent in legal and professional fees. It is not every company could do that. If you're building a little box drain at the side of the road and you build for the government, piece of pavement and thing, you can't take a government to court like that. That is significant money. Namalco can do it today, but other contractors can't. And this pattern of behavior by Rowley, Stuart Young and others is to punish the business community. So you owe people money. Why could they not have paid this 427 million in the first place and begin a process of negotiation to bring down the other part of it and save the interest? We are forgetting that while you did not pay monies to contractors, the interest building up over time, and you have to pay that. And I want to tell the man on the street outside here is that when you pay interest, that is not for work done, Nobody paved a road, nobody built a house, nobody fixed a drain. That is interest because the government failed to pay their debt. So interest which will be $200 to $300 million, we don't know yet. That interest is not for work done. The taxpayer did not get a road, did not get a housing lot, did not get a pavement, did not get a box drain, did not get water That is for work not done. It is for your corruption and your incompetence that we have to pay hundreds of $millions in interest today on this matter. And the EMBDC is a serial loser at court. The Junior Sammy matter I just quote. They lost that. They're appealing, paying again lawyers and professionals to go to the Court of Appeal on a matter where they owe Junior Sammy Construction some money on another EMBDC project called Caroni Savannah Road, I believe. That is their thing. And I come to now a final couple points here. Will the EMBDC do like EFCL, faced with a debt that they cannot manage due, they don't have the competence, faced with debts where there's corruption involved in professional fees and so on, faced with those issues, they close down EFCL, the Education Facility Company Limited. Will you now move to close down EMBDC? And I call upon this government, do not take God out of your thoughts and believe that you can run away from this judgment, run away from the interest, run away from the IPC on PT Moon by shutting down EMBDC. And I call upon the business community, the large-scale contractors, in particular, they should keep their eyes open. Try not to close your eyes at night, because in the middle of the night, they could close down a company owing millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. And the business community, the contractors, I cannot advise them what to do, but they should have their own strategies, because we, as the opposition, is keeping our eye on the government, that they may seek to get away from this by just closing down lock, stock and barrel and saying, look, we bankrupt, we have no money. And this is because of your own incompetence over a period of time, your own level of corruption. And I remind people, there's the former Commissioner of Police, Gary Griffith, who told us that he could not get $100,000 to hire an engineer to support the TTPS in the AV drilling fake oil matter. They wanted some professional help to understand that matter. And they asked for $100,000 just to hire an engineer so he could help the policemen. They couldn't get it, but they get $40 million to pay a British firm that was targeting their political opponents. Today, there's a big matter in Diego Martin, which plain, I believe, with the death of a police officer, the killing of a police officer. Today, if they had given Gary Griffith and the TTPS the money, instead of paying the British firm to hound down your political opponents and make them targets, most blatant, obscene and vile reign of terror of this government is that matter. You could have bought the body cameras, which today would have revealed everything that happened in terms of the killing of the police officer. They could not give Gary Griffith the money for the body cameras, for the pepper spray. They could not do that. They could not provide resources, but they provided resources for the team in England to hunt down their political opponents, as well as they provided resources for the EMBDC to hire Queen's Counsel, to hire all type of professional firms, to check the sand, to dig up sand and gravel and mud. And then at the end of the day, when you finally get judgment, you will have in excess of $800 million to pay. So somebody is happy going to the bank. Is it the lawyers from England? Is it the accountants? Is it the family relatives of PNM high officials? They are happy going to the bank. Their bank account will look good. But the taxpayer of Trinidad and Tobago must fork out another $800 million more or less because of the incompetence of this government. And this is a matter we will also study in greater detail the judgment, and in the coming days we expect to speak to this matter in a bit more detail. But I wanted today to just express those few headline points on this EMBDC matter, and to tell EMBDC, before you declare victory and so on, you should first find out how much you have to pay. Thank you very much, and I am sure that there will be some questions on this matter.
Senator Silvers, earlier this week, the opposition leader said that there were foreign nationals currently in the country conducting spying workshops. What are your thoughts on that?
Our position with respect to any foreign nationals on Trinbagonian soil, especially engaged with respect to the Ministry of National Security, it ties squarely into what we've been constantly calling upon this administration to do, is to be transparent, to account to the citizens of this country, because it's taxpayers' money that is spending. It's not Keith Rowley and Hines and Young chipping together in some pot, and from that they're spending this money. Right? It's not Keith Rowley and Hines and Young and others, as MP Moonilal was saying, going to be paying this debt to contractors. It's really taxpayers. We are the ones funding these things. So we need to have some accountability. So the fact that you have nationals from another country, but presently within Trinidad and Tobago, who are possibly linked to all of this spy software that exists currently right now is being utilized, however it is in fact being utilized. We want some accountability and transparency and a report to be given to the citizens of this country as to what are the movements and account as to what is actually going on with these individuals here. We're not telling you to reveal the crime plan if in fact you ever design one to assist the country. We're not telling you to give that away. Of course not. We are way more responsible than that. But we need some type of accountability as it pertains to what these persons are doing here, what they're engaged in, how much it is costing taxpayers because we are the ones funding it. And it's high time that these persons, Rowley, Hines, and others, et al. As we like to say, come clean to the public and let us know what is actually taking place with these individuals and the spending that is going on and their relations and whatnot that is transpiring within Trinidad and Tobago currently.
Dr. Moonilal, given the course determination on the improper supplementary agreements between EMBDC and the company, do you hold yourself responsible as the line minister at the time?
Okay, well first, let me indicate that, as I said before, these contracts were initiated under the Noel Garcia and Uttara Rao administration of the company, under the Manning administration, I believe. The supplementary agreements did take place, I think, between 2010 and 15, I believe, more or less, April 2012. For the record, just for the record, I assume responsibility for the EMBDC in July 2012, which was really after much of these matters. So, the minister before, incidentally, was, I believe, Mr. Vasan Barrett, Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Marine Affairs and so on. And Mr. Barrett may have something to say on this as well, because I believe that some of these matters predated my responsibility. But having said that, these are matters which the court determined, and although the supplementary agreements, it was determined that they were improper in terms of being signed off by the Chief Executive Officer, the court did take note that they were ratified by the Board of Directors. They were after. Now, had I been in charge in that sense, maybe we would have done it the other way around. We would have first gone to the board and get board decisions and so on, and maybe even noting for cabinet, because when you do things like these, sometimes you may not need cabinet approval, but it is also wise to have a note to cabinet, so cabinet takes note of what is happening. But in terms of direct responsibility, I took over in July 2012 the EMBDC portfolio, and the court has ruled that the supplementary agreement should have been done initially, effectively by the board, not the CEO. And that is something that we have to reflect on in terms of a governance issue. What I can say as well, I just wanted to add to something I said earlier, is that these payments, the government should meet and treat with the contractors involved. And not just Namalco, they are owing millions of dollars to other contractors. There is a responsibility of the government to meet and treat with the contractors, rather than go to court and wait for another $700 to $800 million judgment to hit the government. And then you can't pay because you claim you don't have money. They claim they don't have money for food card. They don't have money for social services. I believe this week we are hearing that in the education sector, in two education institutes, UTT and another one, they can't pay wages, which was the other one, MIT or something. They can't pay wages. So in a country where they are saying they can't pay wages, they just lost a court battle involving $700 to $800 million. And I will put it to the national community, as I did before, that eventually we may strongly have to consider that when a prime minister like Rowley and ministers like Stuart Young and others demit office, we pass the necessary laws to take away their pension and take away their gratuity. We should take their pension and gratuity to pay for this. We should take their pension and gratuity and let them spend their elderly life reflecting on this corruption and incompetence, rather than have the Prime Minister Rowley with a big fat gratuity and pension, and the taxpayer must now find $700 to $800 million to pay. And we got nothing in return for it, because $200 million or so interest payment means that is for absolutely no work. And I want to just indicate to the national community that, God willing, in the next few days when I speak again on any platform, there is now a report that has come to me, which is a mind-boggling report on the conduct of a particular government minister in terms of financial impropriety. And it has gone to the Prime Minister. We have confirmed that this report has gone to the Prime Minister. I have also received a copy. It is not a new report, it is a year or so old, and Dr. Rowley has not acted on that report. And in the next few days, when I speak, I will make reference, and I think I will work with that report as well. And for those of you who know and you follow some of my own statements over the past, I will not speak to an issue unless I have it in black and white. And a current member of this cabinet has been reported to agencies in this country, law enforcement, over financial conduct, and the Prime Minister is aware of it, and I will speak to it in the coming days.
Just a follow-up question. Do you have any idea of the cumulative cost of these judgments against the state from Junior Sammy and now Namalco?
Well, the Junior Sammy judgment alone was in the value of 121 million. The Namalco it may end up to be 700 to 800 million. And I want to remind you that excludes legal and professional fees, which I cannot quantify that. That one I can't, but the people in the industry will tell you it could be around $100 million or so. Because if the company paid X, you assume the government paid a little more. The government will have more resources than the private company in that sense. So we have the EFCL, we have the HDC. The HDC has matters against contractors where it is almost certain they will lose. Almost certain. To hear the minister talking about name and shame people for $100 now, when they cannot meet the contractors and negotiate a settlement in matters which they will clearly lose, and then you will face another problem, having to pay a contractor and having to pay interest and costs. Now in this matter, I just want to put on record too that the way the judgment is written, there are some issues where the company, quote unquote, may be seen to have won. There are some issues where the EMBDC may feel they win. So you don't know about costs, they have to meet to determine that. And that will be a long drawn out matter as well, given the magnitude and complexity of what has happened. So that the taxpayer may well have to pay some of the costs of the private company as well, you don't know. That's a matter to be determined. So it is really a horrible situation for the government to have taken us as a nation during this time when we have so much economic survival issues at stake.
Okay, Mr. Sowers, the Prime Minister said that he's not using Pegasus. The opposition leader has said that there's another software called Predator that he may be using. Do you think the Prime Minister should come out and definitely state what exactly the state is using to conduct intelligence operations?
Again, we are calling on the government to be transparent with respect to these issues. And I would have said it before. There was an article that I think came out last week, Sunday, which dealt with some issues related to the procurement of the software. I think the article referred to the software being a generic version of Pegasus, or having generic features of Pegasus. And as I said before, listen, we are aware that the software is here. Some version of the software is here. Whether it be Pegasus 2.2, Pegasus Lite, as I said before, same great taste, different ingredients, doing the same thing, right? And it is the issue that we actually have is how is the software being utilized? Where is the accountability, the transparency as it pertains to the software and its utilization? Why hasn't the report that is legislated, that has to be laid within the Parliament, that speaks to the usage and the activities of this particular department of the SSA, why hasn't that been laid in the last 5 years? These are the questions that we are asking the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Security to come out and tell the public. The longer their silence is kept with respect to these issues, the more questions that are going to be put to them until they come out and indicate something. There are so many things that are occurring within this country that remains and continues to be enigmas on the minds of citizens within this country. Things that are happening, and when we are asking questions, we're not getting responses. How is the government in possession, seized and in possession of certain pieces of information that they are acting on? Right? We want to know. They love to go on platforms, political platforms as well too, and speak all sorts of things of security information that they have on who in the opposition doing this and who down the road doing that, and always macking someone. And we would have raised, not only in joint select committees, MP Moonilal and MP Hussain would have raised those issues. Why is it that the then Minister of National Security, Stuart Young, could have stood on a political platform and speak on issues that he would only be in possession of based upon him being Minister of National Security? That is not the place for those things. That is not how it is designed for those things to be used. And that is why we are questioning their activities. The evidence is there already, right? So the only way they can turn this thing, or at least provide the public with an assurance that they are not acting ultra-virus or illegally, is to be transparent with the information. And as a responsible opposition led by Kamala Prasad, we will continue to call on them to provide us with the information and the answers that we require to put this matter to rest.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, members of the press. We have had what I suspect to be over 600 or 700 persons viewing. I don't know if we have 700 media officers in Trinidad and Tobago, but clearly members of the national community have taken great interest in this press conference. I want to thank all of you. We will continue to keep the country abreast on these matters and other pressing issues. Before we close, may I, on behalf of the opposition leader, on behalf of all my colleagues in both houses and the party, extend Ramadan Mubarak to members of the Muslim community, and for a very peaceful and joyful Eid al-Fitr celebration and acknowledgement in the coming days. We wish that the Muslim community's value on peace, charity and love would be shared with all of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.